Hello friends, welcome back to part 17 of my Tesla Q4 2022 earnings forecast video review series. I am joined as always by my host. There's Loki in his bed, snoozing, and let's get right back to where we left off. We covered the CEO bonus forecasting sections in my model in the previous video. Along with the GAAP earnings section, which is not the non-GAAP earnings. We'll get to that in just a minute. And we'll just keep going. So what's the next thing after the CEO stock compensation expense line in my forecast model? Well, it's the other SG&A stock compensation expense line. So how does this forecast work? Well, I'm just taking the average that we've seen over the prior 4 quarters, and I'm applying a growth rate to that. The growth rate that I'm forecasting is 8% on top of what we've seen in the past. If we get that, it'll be $95 million worth of other SG&A stock comp. Then on the, so that's just the stock compensation portion of SG&A, which is a tiny portion, only about 1/10 of the expense, you can see from the prior quarter. Then I'm doing something similar with the non-stock SG&A expense. I'm just saying, hey, what was it last quarter? Let's inflate that by 4% and say it'll be 4% higher than it was in the previous quarter. That seems like a decent enough guess at what the SG&A expense will be. So the 3 of these combined are what make up total SG&A expense. People do lose track of the weirdness. You can see over time the CEO stock compensation used to be a really big fraction of the total, and it isn't anymore. So sometimes you'll see Tesla haters claiming that there's fraud because the SG&A total hasn't gone up by enough. I made a video explaining why they were wrong, and it's because they don't dive into the details to figure out what the CEO stock compensation should have been based on the GAAP accounting rules over time. All right, what's next? Stock compensation in cost of revenues. So we've got a few different kinds of total stock-based compensation here. We've already accounted for the piece that lands in SG&A because it's related to people whose regular labor expense hits in the SG&A area. But everybody at Tesla can earn stock compensation if they meet the requirements. So cost of revenues, there is a component of stock compensation in there, and Tesla reports this in their 10Qs. That's what these actuals are over time. And so I'm forecasting $136 million worth of stock compensation hitting within the cost of revenues for people who work at factories and get some of their compensation as stock. Then for research and development, I'm forecasting $132 million for people in the research and development area at Tesla. There hasn't been any hitting restructuring and other, but it could hit there. I'm not forecasting any for that reason, and that gives you the total stock-based compensation, which includes the CEO's stock compensation and the SG&A stock compensation. And that's how you get to the non-GAAP earnings. What's the non-GAAP earnings? It's taking the GAAP earnings of $5,133,000 in my forecast, again, including that one-time tax item that people will back out. But it will get reported by Tesla if it happens. Fingers crossed, we'll see. Maybe it's finally time for that one-time item to come through. I forecast it last year and the year before, and it didn't happen. So maybe it won't happen again. We'll see. So you take the total stock-based compensation out, and then if there is other dilutive convertible debt and buyout of non-controlling interest, it would also need to go into that adjustment. But I'm not forecasting anything there. There hasn't been anything recently hitting that line. So there you go. There's your non-GAAP earnings. $5.5 billion is what I'm forecasting, which would be $1.57 worth of non-GAAP earnings before the adjustment. And then if you knock off the 45 cents for the one-time tax item, that gets you down to $1.12 And that is probably a decent enough place for me to end this video and say, if you've enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel, why not go ahead and subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell to get alerts when I post fresh content to YouTube. Thank you to everyone who supports me, especially Kathy Kitchler and Halter Ferguson Financial, my executive producers, and I will see you in the next one.